If you're just tuning in, this is Alan Barnes of the Original 70s Soundtrack, and we have on the phone with us live from Florida, Mr. Steve Morse of Deep Purple. How's it going, Steve?
Very good. Thanks, Alan.
We were just talking a little bit before the interview got started, and I was bragging on our audience, how musically literate our audience. We can tell by the requests we get. We're on Coast to Coast, and a lot of listeners have found out about the show through Facebook, and they listen on the internet. But we'll get requests for like obscure Montrose tracks or Humble Pie or the Dixie Dregs, Steve's first band, and so it's pretty awesome.
For me, it's a big deal being the only American in a British band, and it's not very often we get to play the United States. So this time it's a little bit different. In order to get into some of the rooms, to make it the performance seem less threatening, and just a different vibe. We're doing the show with orchestral backup accompaniment on some things, but it's not an orchestral gig. It's a Deep Purple gig,
right?
But with some horns and strings on some songs.
I'm a Georgia boy. I grew up down the street from Capricorn Records.
All right.
In the mid to late 70s, when at the height of everything, I'm a guitar player too, and I sort of learned at your feet. I think it was it Champagne Jam 2 you guys were on, or Champagne Jam 1? Do you remember that gig? We're talking Dixie Dregs going all the way back.
Yeah, the Georgia Tech Stadium.
Yeah,
that one.
At Grant Field, yeah.
Those were the days, you know. We were friends with a lot of the Georgia bands, and they would let us on those kind of shows where we didn't really fit because we were just too weird, you know, a jazz rock blend. But still, we were friends with everybody, you know. I think that was Atlanta Rhythm Section was one of the big bands.
Yeah.
They were friends of ours, and the guys from Kansas were, and 38 Special, and we just had a lot of good camaraderie back then.
Yeah, there was always a band in one of those shows too that was, because I remember like the Doobie Brothers were in that lineup, and there were 2 years, and I get them confused. One year, like the opening band was the Cars, I think the first year, but there were always those curveballs in there that it wasn't just like some Southern rock festival. There was always a good mix of bands, and that was what was cool about Capricorn label. I thought was pretty diverse. It's considered a Southern rock label, but
if you go back from Otis Redding to South African acts that he signed, including Trevor Rabin's early band,
right?
Rabbit. And Phil Walden he just liked people that had fire inside,
right?
And he truly was like an art collector. It was all about the art with him. And when we were with them, they were just about to go into bankruptcy, and then when they came out of bankruptcy later, he came to us again about doing an album, which we did.
Right.
With the Dregs. You know?
I describe it to people living in Middle Georgia from like say 76 to 80 was like living in Seattle in the late 80s, early 90s when record companies were just blowing into town besides Capricorn, and guys you knew were getting deals. I was friends with some guys in a band called Stillwater. They signed to Capricorn. And
those are friends of ours, yeah.
Yeah, they did some regional stuff. They did Mindbender, and some other guys in town that used to be called Roundhouse, they changed their name to Doc Holliday and got a deal with A&M. So it was really cool because the people, guys down the street were getting record deals, and it was, for me as a musician, as a guitar player at that time, it was just like hugely inspirational because it's like, oh God, we could start a band and make it too.
Well, yeah, and times were different. Things could get played just on the merit of the song. I remember going into the record company because I knew people at Capricorn and was literally hanging out because I would go to the record company and be waiting to talk to somebody and hear them talking about the like Mindbenders getting added here and here and
right.
there, and they weren't bribing people to do it. It was just happening. The DJs would say, "Hey, I like that song. It's different. It's really it's a novelty rock song that people like, so I'm going to play it." Period.
Is the original Dixie Dregs catalog, though, is it out there like as standalone releases, or has the band sort of been rolled into a retrospective best of?
Actually, anybody can release anything as long as they deal with the record company. In fact, we've tried to reissue some of the albums, but they have pretty onerous requirements as far as you got to pay so much up front and print so many copies. So we still have a few legally licensed copies we sell every once in a while when we go out on tour as the Dregs.
Right.
But it seems like anybody. There's been like 3 different companies putting out Dregs albums and their compilations.
Right.
And there's not a whole lot we have to do with it. In fact, there's nothing we can say about it. It's legal because somebody else owns them. I can't even make a copy of my own records.
Right. Yeah, that gets into the mechanicals, and we've talked to so many people in this business that, and they all have the same horror story. It's like we just wanted drugs, chicks, and rock and roll, and we signed, and we were young, and we didn't have lawyers look at the deals, and then all these years later, they didn't realize, wow, I signed away my publishing, or something crazy like that.
Well, I remember signing away my publishing and saying to the lawyer who was in the room, we didn't talk about that. That wasn't in the talking points. It's a deal breaker thing. You got to sign it. And I was the main songwriter in the band, so I remember that day putting the pen to the paper, saying, "This sucks."
Yeah.
And sure enough, it still sucks.
I try to describe it to people who don't know, and I hope you're not offended by this description, but I'll say, weather report, and yes, had a baby, and it was born in Georgia.
Yeah, that's cool.
It had, it's got jazz, it's got progressive, it's got some with a southern accent. It's just this mishmash, this cornucopia. Right, you did some time in Kansas in the 80s. I think you actually did a couple studio albums with Kansas, like in the mid-80s.
Yeah, I was in Kansas for 5 years. And there, again, a group of friends that we knew from Atlanta. Well, Steve Walsh, who actually was a guest on one of our albums. Anyway, we were friends, and I heard from Phil they were going to get back together with Steve Walsh. So I was pretty excited about it and said, hey, if you need any help, let me know. So they did. We wrote together and kept writing together. It was going really well. And then we got done with that. They said, well, we got an offer for a tour, doing a tour with Night Ranger, and we went all across the U.S. with that, and that was like a little sellout tour. Things were going really well. Something happened, as far as the industry changing and becoming extremely glitzy, show busy,
right?
And based on what MTV thought, there was a big push for the band to change the direction of the music a little bit, and I was just rebelling against that. And some people thought I was trying to replace Kerry Livgren. Nobody can replace Kerry. Anyway, at some point, it just came to a thing where I said, this isn't quite right for me anymore, because the direction that I see the band is different from the way that the industry push is going.
Probably asked this question a million times, to describe the difference in your approach. I mean, following Richie Blackmore into Deep Purple, although by now I would guess, I haven't gotten the calculator out, you've probably been in that band longer than Richie was in. Is that correct?
That's correct. Done more gigs than any guitar player. Actually, during the time that people associate as being the classic Deep Purple years, there were several times when Richie wasn't the guitar player. Tommy Bolin,
that's right.
The most well-known. There was a brief time when Randy California from Spirit was in the band. And then Richie came back, and of course, he changed bass players and got Glenn Hughes and went back to Roger Glover, who's still with us. Roger,
right, absolutely.
And Ian Pace and Ian Gillan, the guys from the original Smoke and the Water days are still in the band. We have Don Airey from
Ozzy's
worked
band.
with Ozzy and,
Sure.
and Rainbow. And
yeah, I think you've got a side project going on with, gosh, who was it? It was like you and Don, and I saw Bob Daisley and Lee Kerslake?
Yeah,
which
and
essentially recreates that essentially recreates that first Ozzy album band.
Yeah, they were looking for to do those songs over that they had written and sort of got manipulated out of by a disagreement with Ozzy's management. So.
You mean Sharon?
I initially said, yeah, I'm not going to say. I initially said, somebody else has got to be better than this.
Right.
At this than me, because I'm just not a great recreator of a person's style.
Right.
Because Randy Rhoads did such a great job.
Oh, sure.
But then they said, well, we're loosening it up, and we want it to sound different, but we want it to sound good. He said, well, we'd like to do some original stuff. One Ozzy tune, one original tune, like that, back and forth. Mm-hmm. I said, well, that makes some sense for me,
Sure.
And we got together, did the writing. It's just fantastic. Jimmy Barnes was a singer that he had one hit in the United States with
In Excess. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he and I share a surname, but we're not related.
Jimmy is such a great singer, and he's huge in Australia, where we did the only gigs we've ever done with that group. The group's called Living Loud.
So what's touring with Deep Purple like? I know you mentioned that you're bringing some orchestral pieces out on the road, but just in general, what's it like out on the road these days, and schedule-wise, and is it getting easier? Is it getting tougher?
Oh, we got it pretty easy. It's a great organization, and all, and everybody knows what they're doing. They've been doing it for 40 years, so we pretty much got it down. We just find ourselves in the craziest changes. Like we just had dinner with the president of Russia last 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then the next day we're in Ukraine or something. So you have those kind of ups and downs where, yeah, one day everybody's rushing to get your luggage and stuff that you don't really need, and then the next time you're just looking for a ride.
Yeah, I'm sure they are. Yeah.
In general, it's a very easy existence in terms of all I have to do is worry about music. You're out there, you find yourself hustling and working on outside projects and writing and recording in a hotel room and doing all the stuff that anybody would do.
So if our listeners want to catch, and if you're just tuning in, we're actually talking to Steve Morse from both the band Dixie Dregs and Deep Purple. But Steve, if our listeners want to catch you on the road this summer with Purple or even Steve Morse Band, what's the best place for them to go check?
DeepPurple.com or SteveMorse.com. We're going to be starting in Canada, Quebec, somewhere around there, Ontario or Quebec.
Okay.
Coming down to New York, down all the way down to, not very far, like maybe down to Atlantic City, then back up north across to the West Coast.
Awesome.
And I wish we were doing more, but that's the best I could get out of these guys.
Yeah. The tour routing is getting really, really odd. So many people, like we were just talking to Leo Sayer a couple of days ago, and he's doing like 80 shows a year in Australia because he's a really strong draw in Australia, and Australia is doing better with live music than we are. But then I'm talking to guys here, like people that have had #1 hits, multiple big hits. And they're just struggling to get the fees up where they can play these little places. Nobody wants to pay travel anymore. I guess it's the economy too, but yeah, it's really rough out there. And I guess Deep Purple's a stronger draw than a lot.
Deep Purple has a huge overhead because they've been so successful using Europe as the home base. The organization is used to having a really high monthly cost. So when we come to U.S., something's got to be going on, or else they can't make it work financially. That's been the problem. The thing that's killed me over all these years is that it's harder to get the big fees in America than it is almost anywhere else in the world. Well, I tell you, my son is in a young band. They're really good, but they're having such a hard time. The key to making things that good again is on a community level. Just support any kind of place where young musicians can play.
Sure.
That's the whole deal.
Well, Steve, thank you for giving us a holler today. Again, fans of Deep Purple and Steve Morse as an individual, you can go to
SteveMorse.com or DeepPurple.com.
Well, Steve, have fun out on the road with Deep Purple, and we thank you for calling and giving us a call.
Thank you, Alan. I really appreciate it.
All right, man. Take care, dude.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.